The sirens were wailing, loud, urgent, piercing through the quiet of Silver Pine Estates like a blade slicing through silk. Michael Adams sprinted out his front door, waving his arms desperately at the approaching ambulance. "Over here! Hurry! She's not breathing right." His 10-year-old daughter, Emily, was inside, face pale, chest heaving shallowly, gasping for air that just wouldn't come. But the ambulance didn't stop at his driveway. Couldn't, because a car was parked across it. A white Lexus. Michael's eyes locked on it, rage and disbelief colliding in his chest. He knew that car. He knew the woman behind the wheel. "Karen!" he shouted, running toward her. "Move your car. Now!" Karen Fields stood in front of her Lexus, arms crossed, lips pursed in a smug line. She didn't flinch, didn't move, didn't blink. "You can wait," she said coolly. "We all have to follow the rules." "The rules?" Michael shouted, his voice cracking. "My daughter is dying in there." The ambulance screeched to a halt at the edge of the block, trapped. EMTs jumped out, hauling gear, but they couldn't reach the house. The stretcher wouldn't fit between the hedges. They needed that driveway. Michael ran back, frantic now. "Emily, baby, hold on." His hands trembled as he tried to lift her. She was so small, too light. Her lips were blue. Across the street, behind a wide second-story window, someone was watching. Judge Harold Thompson, retired federal judge, stood behind the glass, one hand tightening on his cane, the other already reaching for his phone. He had lived in Silver Pine Estates for 20 years, seen every petty HOA squabble, every pointless fine, every Karen-fueled tantrum. But what he saw now was different. This wasn't a violation. This was a crime. As he dialed 911, his voice was low and firm. "This is Judge Harold Thompson. I just witnessed a woman block an ambulance from reaching a medical emergency. You need to send police. Immediately." And as the EMTs struggled, as Michael collapsed beside his daughter with tears running down his face, the wheels of justice were already turning. Because this time, the judge saw everything, and he wasn't just going to watch. Michael Adams had never expected to end up in a place like Silver Pine Estates. It was the kind of neighborhood where mailboxes matched, lawn edges were trimmed like military cuts, and neighbors waved with just enough warmth to seem friendly, but not enough to invite conversation. To most, it was perfect. For Michael, it was a compromise. Quiet place, clean, predictable, safe. He moved there 6 months earlier, just him and his daughter Emily. She was 10, funny, curious, and painfully fragile. Born with a rare congenital heart defect, Emily had spent more time in hospitals than playgrounds. Her condition made even the most normal days a gamble. But she smiled. She always smiled. Michael, a former paramedic turned home healthcare worker, wanted a fresh start after Emily's last surgery. Somewhere peaceful where she could rest, breathe easy, and feel like a normal kid for once. Silver Pine seemed like that kind of place. Until they met Karen Fields. Karen wasn't just a neighbor. She was the HOA president. The kind of woman who took rules personally, as if she'd written them in stone herself. She wore beige like a uniform and walked her schnauzer like it was an escort patrol. From the first week, she made her presence known. Started with a knock on the door, sharp, impatient. "This ramp," she said, pointing to the small, custom-built access ramp Michael had installed for Emily, wasn't pre-approved. "It violates the aesthetic code of the community." Michael had smiled, trying to be polite. "It's for my daughter. She needs it to get in and out." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Rules are rules. If we make exceptions for you, we'll have to do it for everyone." He thought she'd let it go. She didn't. Over the weeks, the notes started showing up. Oxygen machine humming too loudly. Garage door left open, unsightly. Excessive medical visits disturbing neighborhood tranquility. Michael swallowed his pride and paid the minor fines. He thought maybe, just maybe, if he kept his head down, things would settle. They didn't. Karen's hostility wasn't random. It was targeted. And Emily noticed. One afternoon, as they sat on the porch enjoying the breeze, Emily looked up from her sketchbook. "Daddy, Why doesn't she like us? Michael didn't answer right away. His jaw clenched. His hands tightened around the armrest. She doesn't understand, sweetheart. Some people are like that. Emily looked away. Her fingers stopped sketching. The smile faded. From across the street, Karen watched. A smirk tugged at her lips as she turned and walked her dog away. Slow, deliberate, satisfied. But what Karen didn't know was that she wasn't the only one watching. Judge Harold Thompson, 2 doors down, had seen her expression. He'd seen the notes. He'd heard the snide remarks muttered loud enough for Emily to hear. He had lived through decades of courtrooms filled with liars, manipulators, and abusers. He recognized the kind of cruelty that disguised itself as order. He said nothing yet, just observed. But deep down, a line was forming, and Karen was inching closer to crossing it. The air in Silver Pine Estates had begun to change. Not in temperature or scent, but in the way it felt when Michael stepped outside. Heavy, quiet, watched. Karen Fields wasn't content with writing citations and slipping passive-aggressive notes under the door anymore. Her campaign was escalating, becoming personal. It started with the ambulance calls. Emily's heart condition meant occasional emergencies. Rapid heartbeats, difficulty breathing, sudden fatigue that could spiral into something worse. Every paramedic who came knew the address. They never lingered longer than necessary. They were fast, professional, respectful. But Karen didn't see it that way. She sent formal complaints to the HOA board, claiming Michael was misusing community resources and creating noise disruptions. In one meeting, she stood before the board holding a printout of 911 call logs. "It's not a hospital," she said coldly. "We have to draw the line somewhere." Michael wasn't there to defend himself. He was at home, holding Emily's hand through another bad night. One day, a notice was taped to his door, Karen's signature at the bottom. Excessive use of emergency services. Final warning. He stared at it in disbelief. A final warning for trying to save his daughter's life. Judge Thompson received a copy of the meeting minutes. He read them 3 times, then folded the paper, slid it into his desk, and said nothing. But his jaw had tightened, and stayed that way all evening. The real tipping point came 2 weeks later. It was a hot afternoon. Michael was helping Emily into the car for a follow-up appointment. Her breathing was shallow, slow. He moved with the calm urgency of someone who'd done it too many times. As he secured her oxygen tank and gently buckled her in, Karen's voice rang out from her porch. "Another trip? Maybe if you stopped babying her, she'd get stronger." Michael turned slowly. His arms hung at his sides. His eyes burned. "Don't," he said softly. Karen lifted a phone as if to take a picture. "You're disrupting the peace again." Michael didn't respond. He closed the door, got into the car, and drove off, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. That night, Emily asked, "Are we going to have to move again?" Michael's heart broke. He knelt beside her, his voice cracking. "No, we're not running. Not this time." But things only got worse. Karen began parking her car just slightly into his driveway. Enough to make getting the stretcher out hard for paramedics. She claimed it was an accident every time. The HOA board refused to intervene. "There's no hard proof," they told Michael. "She hasn't technically broken a rule. It wasn't just obstruction. It was sabotage." Then came the cruelest blow. Emily collapsed in the driveway one morning. Oxygen line tangled, body limp. Michael rushed to her side, shouting for help. Karen stepped outside with her dog, looked over and turned around, walked right back inside without a word. Judge Thompson saw it all. From his window, every detail. Later that night, he called a friend still active in the county prosecutor's office. "Can obstruction of medical care be prosecuted in a civil neighborhood dispute?" he asked plainly. The answer came with hesitation. "Only if it causes harm." The judge hung up. "Then let's hope it doesn't come to that." But it did, because Karen wasn't finished. She felt untouchable, invincible. Michael documented everything. Pictures of her car, copies of the notes, witness names. He filed 3 formal complaints, all ignored. Neighbors stayed quiet, fearful. No one wanted to be on the wrong side of Karen Fields. She'd fine people for mailbox flags being too bright. And Emily, she was growing quieter too. She stopped sitting outside, stopped drawing, stopped asking about school. Michael sat at her bedside one night and listened to her breathing, slow and steady under the soft hum of the oxygen machine. He thought about moving, again. Thought about selling the house, packing up, finding another corner of the world that didn't have someone like Karen in it. But then Emily opened her eyes and whispered, "You're my hero, Daddy." And Michael knew. They weren't going anywhere. He was going to fight. He just didn't know how soon the battle would come crashing down his front door, with sirens blaring and a white Lexus in the way. It began with a cough. Then another. Michael turned, halfway through making breakfast, and saw Emily slumped forward on the couch. Her skin was pale, lips tinged blue. The oxygen tank hissed beside her, but it wasn't enough. Her breath was shallow, gasping. Her fingers twitched weakly. "Emily?" No response. He dropped the pan, rushed over, lifted her into his arms like he had a dozen times before. Her head fell limply against his shoulder. He didn't waste a second. Grabbed the emergency phone. 911. "My daughter, her heart. She's not breathing right. I need an ambulance at 647 Magnolia Lane, Silver Pine Estates. Hurry." He didn't wait for the dispatcher to finish. He grabbed the emergency bag, cracked open the oxygen backup, and began administering the pulse oximeter. Numbers too low, too damn low. Then he heard it, distant, but approaching. Sirens. Michael rushed to the front door and flung it open. Relief surged through him, help was almost here. He turned to unlock the gate, and froze. The driveway, blocked. Parked across it, just like always, was Karen's Lexus RX, gleaming in the morning sun, angled perfectly to obstruct the entrance. Michael's heart skipped. No, 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 no. He bolted outside. Karen was standing by her car, coffee in hand, sunglasses on, watching. "Move it!" he shouted, sprinting toward her. "She can't breathe. The ambulance can't get in." Karen didn't move. She didn't even blink. "I warned you, Michael," she said calmly. "This neighborhood isn't a circus. All this chaos, the sirens, people are tired of it." Michael was trembling. "She's dying, you lunatic. Move the car." Karen sipped her coffee. "You overreact. Every single time." The ambulance turned onto the street, only to stop dead at the Lexus blockade. EMTs jumped out, grabbing gear, trying to find a way around. "Are you kidding me?" one shouted. "We can't get through." Michael ran back to the house, picked Emily up, her body limp, breaths fading, and stumbled back toward the street. He was gasping now too, not from exhaustion, but from desperation. "She's not gonna make it," one EMT muttered as they tried to reach him with a collapsible stretcher. "We're losing time." And across the street, behind his large bay window, Judge Thompson watched it all. His eyes were wide, his lips pressed thin. One hand gripped the edge of his desk as the other picked up the phone. 911, he said into the receiver, his voice cold and certain. "This is retired Judge Harold Thompson. I am witnessing a civilian deliberately blocking emergency medical access. This is obstruction. You need to send law enforcement immediately." Down on the street, chaos swirled. Neighbors peeked through blinds. A few stepped onto porches. Phones were recording. Whispers traveled like wildfire. Karen finally turned to look at the EMTs trying to angle around her car. She rolled her eyes. "You could have planned better. It's not my fault." But her voice shook, just a little. Michael didn't hear any of it. He was on his knees now, cradling Emily on the lawn, trying to keep her airway clear, whispering her name like a lifeline. "Stay with me, baby. Please." EMTs worked fast. One administered oxygen while another prepped an emergency injection. But they were still out in the open. No equipment, no proper workspace. One of them turned to the others. "We need to move. Fast. Get her in the rig." With practiced hands, They hoisted Emily onto a soft board and jogged her toward the ambulance, weaving between bushes. Seconds mattered now. Behind them, the sound of police sirens joined the fading echo of the ambulance. Karen was still standing by her car, arms folded, when the cruiser rolled up. She greeted the officer with a theatrical sigh. "Let me guess. You're here because someone blew this out of proportion again?" But the officer didn't answer her, because the door to Judge Thompson's house opened, and the elderly man stepped out, wearing a long robe and a sharp expression. "I saw it all," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "She blocked the ambulance. She refused to move. She delayed life-saving care." Karen's face faltered. "Judge Thompson?" the officer said, stepping forward. "Are you willing to give a formal statement?" "I already did," the judge replied, holding up his phone. "And I'll testify." The officer turned to Karen. "Ma'am, I need you to step away from the vehicle." "Wait, this is crazy," she said. "I didn't do anything." "He's making it sound worse than it was. You parked across a medical emergency and refused to move. You obstructed care," the officer said firmly. "You're under arrest for reckless endangerment and obstruction of emergency personnel." The cuffs clicked around her wrists. Her coffee hit the ground. Gasps rippled down the street. Some neighbors applauded. One woman cried. Karen's world, the control, the smugness, the power, crumbled in the blink of an eye. And as the cruiser pulled away, Emily's ambulance turned the corner at the other end of the block, its sirens still blaring. Michael sat in the back, holding her hand, his eyes red, his jaw clenched. The fight wasn't over yet, but justice had finally stepped outside, and it wore a robe and slippers. The courtroom was packed, not with strangers but with neighbors, people who had watched from behind curtains, who had stayed quiet too long. Karen Fields sat stiffly at the defendant's table, her face pale, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She no longer looked confident, no longer smug, just small. Michael sat across from her. Not in uniform, not with anger, but with something heavier. Grief, fatigue. He held Emily's hand, now smaller than ever in his. She'd recovered, mostly, but the trauma of that morning lingered in the circles under her eyes, in the way she held his hand a little tighter whenever someone raised their voice. Judge Howard Franks, the presiding magistrate, adjusted his glasses and looked out over the courtroom. "We are here to determine criminal liability in the matter of Karen Fields, charged with obstruction of emergency services and reckless endangerment of a minor." Testimonies began. The EMTs spoke first, detailing the seconds lost, the lack of access, the improvised rescue on the lawn. Then Judge Thompson took the stand. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "I saw her block the driveway. I saw the ambulance forced to stop at the end of the street. I saw a father run with his unconscious child in his arms." He paused. "And I saw her, standing there, arms crossed, watching. That wasn't negligence. That was cruelty." Karen's defense attorney tried to claim miscommunication, a misunderstanding, but the courtroom had already heard enough. The video recordings were played. Her voice, sharp, dismissive, echoed through the chamber. The jury flinched. The verdict didn't take long. Guilty, on both counts. Karen Fields was sentenced to 18 months in county jail, plus 200 hours of community service and removal from the Silver Pine HOA board permanently. She was also ordered to pay fines, some to cover Emily's additional treatment, others as punitive damages. She didn't look at Michael when they led her out in cuffs. He didn't look at her either. Weeks passed. Emily slowly began to smile again. She painted. She played cards with Michael. Her cheeks were fuller, her breathing stronger. Neighbors who once stayed silent now dropped by. One brought soup. Another brought a bouquet. Someone offered to repaint the ramp. And on a breezy Saturday afternoon, Judge Thompson visited. He stood on the porch, holding a basket of oranges and a handwritten card. "You did good, son," he said. "You stood your ground." Michael nodded. "I just wanted her safe." "You made her safe," the judge replied. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting soft gold across the lawn, Michael and Emily sat side by side on the porch swing. Emily leaned her head against his shoulder, wrapped in her favorite blanket, blue with little stars. "Is she gone?" she asked. Michael looked toward the quiet street. "Yeah," he said. "She's gone." Emily smiled. "Good." Silence settled, peaceful this time. No notes, no barking orders, no cars blocking the driveway, just quiet, and the sound of wind through the trees. Silver Pine Estates had changed, not in appearance but in spirit. People smiled now, lingered in driveways, said hello without looking over their shoulders. And in one small house at the end of Magnolia Lane, a father finally exhaled. He didn't win by fighting back. He won by not backing down, and by making sure the one person who mattered most, his daughter, knew she was never, ever alone.